It was last May that Derek Chauvin murdered George Floyd as bystanders looked on in horror. And of course, in the aftermath of that, we've seen this enormous cultural, political reckoning with the underlying systems of racism and oppression in the criminal justice system, in housing and education, in our culture. There hasn't been a huge change in the statutory guidelines for how policing works and what it is. Certainly nothing at the federal level, although there are bills on the table. With me now is someone who plays a role in whatever legislation this Congress might produce. Senator Reverend Raphael Warnock. He's a Democrat from Georgia, one of the newest members of that august body. How do you see your role, Senator, as someone who was a pastor for many years and a pastor in communities that had dealt with policing and its excesses or indignities at times, and now as a senator in the United States Senate?
Well, thank you so much, Chris. It's good to be here with you. First of all, let me just say that my heart and my prayers are with the family of George Floyd. The jury got it right today, but that won't bring George Floyd back. The pain that this family is experiencing is unbearable, the meaning of their loss unspeakable. And while the jury got it right today, we've got to do everything we can here in the Congress to make sure that we get the public policy right. And one is not a substitute for the other. And so I will continue to work hard, as I've been doing, even before I came to the U.S. Senate, to make sure that we live into our ideals of equal protection under the law. That's what George Floyd deserved. He didn't get it. And we've got to make sure that our communities are safe and that we do everything we can to bend that arc closer to justice.
You know, for a very long time, the United States Senate has not been a particularly representative body in terms of the people that occupy those desks that you now sit in and the degree to which they represent the people of the nation along a bunch of lines, race, gender, very notably, and others. Can you talk a little bit about what your experience with police and policing has been like as a black man in America and how that informs how you think about this verdict and the policy objectives as well?
Chris, I was 12 years old when I was marched through a grocery store because I had my hands in my pockets. I looked suspicious. And so the police marched me and a couple of friends, ironically, all of us pastors' kids, through the store. I was stopped and frisked and humiliated. And when, of course, they found that we weren't guilty of shoplifting, there was no apology, no acknowledgement of the humiliation. And if you ask black men all across this country, but Hispanic men and women as well, people of color, you'll hear these stories. We know what it's like to have to tell our children and our nieces and nephews what to do when you're pulled over by the police so that you survive that encounter. And so I bring that experience with me to the U.S. Senate. After all, I'm only the 11th black senator in the history of this country. And when we are talking about criminal justice reform, the need for reform in our policing, if you're talking about voting rights, a whole range of issues, representation matters. That when we have a legislative body that more accurately reflects our actual citizenry, I think we got a better shot at getting the policy right. And so I'm going to be pushing my colleagues over the next few days and weeks to make sure we get the public policy right. The jury got the verdict right, but that does not solve this issue. It took a whole lot to get here. We had a whole coalition of conscience marching out in American streets last summer responding to this. A whole lot of things had to line up in order to make sure that a jury didn't come back buying the argument of the defense, that instead of seeing what we could see with our own eyes, that somehow if we would have bought into their argument, George Floyd killed himself and not the man whose knee was on his neck. And so we've got to make sure that we codify justice in our legislation, passed the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act.
You know, it strikes me that a lot of the issues the country faces and some of the the depths of our political divisions center on a sort of question about whether we're kind of fighting over a zero-sum pie in which one group is going to get a slice and the other doesn't, or we're engaged in some sort of collective undertaking that can make everyone flourish, allow everyone to flourish, can improve life for everyone else. We're seeing that along voting rights, right, where you have this attack on voting rights, this idea that, like, if too many of the wrong people vote, that takes away the power of my vote. I think there's people who feel that way about policing, that if the police are not, sent into these neighborhoods to deal with those people, then that's going to imperil my safety. You're in a narrowly contested state. You've got to go back and tell this narrowly contested state a story that breaks out of that. What are you telling your constituents in Georgia, Republican, Democrat, across the spectrum?
Oh, I am going to continue to tell the people of Georgia the same story that I tell every Sunday from my pulpit, that of one blood, God has made all nations to dwell upon the face of the earth, and in him we live, move, and have our being. I'm going to continue to try to tell the American story, the story of e pluribus unum, out of many one. We've always had to fight for that. It is the covenant that we have with one another as an American people. And there always have been, and there probably always will be, demagogues who try to divide us in order to hold on to their power. Right now, we're witnessing this with the fight for voting rights. They're attacking our democracy based on a big lie. And the goal is power, but it's rooted in an old mythology that says, as you put it, that somehow if you give other people, those people, access, that somehow that takes something away from you. The opposite is actually true, that when we are open, when we are inclusive, when we embrace one another, we create a society that is good enough for all of our children, ensures that our economy prospers and that the people can thrive, that the people's voices can be heard, and we move closer towards our ideals.
Hey, thanks for watching our YouTube channel. You should know that you can follow today's top stories and breaking news and catch up on your favorite MSNBC shows all in one place. Download the NBC News app today.